triaged, and what I was told, even though I was presenting with a significant neck injury, I was told that I was in the wrong place, basically. And I asked the doctor, are you saying that somebody who's presenting with sharp pain, difficulty swallowing, who has had a previous neck injury, and so there's a likelihood that there's a recurrence of that same neck injury, is in the wrong place presenting to accident and emergency? So I asked the doctor, I said, "Doctor, if that's the case, would you give me your name, please? And will you write down what you've said?" And do you know what he didn't do? He didn't write down what he said, but he wrote down his name. Paul Kelly, Dr. Paul Kelly of Accident and Emergency. It's his own handwriting. And just before he wrote that down, he denied me service. I said, "Can you write that down?" Then he said, "No, I believe there's been a breakdown in our relationship." I said, "What relationship? Are we married?" He said, "No, your doctor-patient relationship." I said, "Well, I'm talking to you normally. I'm talking to you amicably. How's there been a breakdown? You're signing your name. You're telling me something. Will you write down what you're telling me?" He didn't. All he did was write down his name and call a security guard. There was a security guard beside him. He started raising his voice and shouting over me. I told him I had a sore voice, and I don't know what he was trying to make me do, to shout over him or to raise my voice along with him. So I said, what are you shouting over me for? You've to at least do no harm. Like, it's likely that if somebody's talking and you start raising your voice and lifting up your voice, that the other person's going to be more inclined to automatically raise theirs, so to be heard. Well, I said to him, "Doctor, I'm presenting with potentially a severe neck injury to the A&E, and you're sending me away to a GP. Where do you think a GP would send you?" Do you know what he said? An ENT. He would send you to an ear, nose and throat, even though there's a potential threatening injury that you're presenting with. I also presented with problems with the bowel. Do you know what they said to me? "You're presenting with these problems that are 10 years old." Can you imagine saying to somebody that presented with a heart attack, "You had your first heart attack 10 years ago, so you really need to see your GP. You've come to the wrong place. Now, if you don't mind, I'll have to call the security unless you leave." That's basically what just happened to me in A&E. I've been to A&E, been to doctors, and all they've been doing is denying me access to proper medical assessment and treatment. They talked about, "We'll give you a full blood workup and give you a full workup, okay?" Then what happens? The doctor comes out. Now, this is highly unusual. I was just triaged. The doctor comes out and he says, Stephen, I thought, great, they're going to actually take this potential severity of the neck injury seriously here. He calls me in, he goes, "In here." And then he listened to me for a few moments and basically says, you're in the wrong place. He said, "You're going to send somebody who's presented to you with a potential neck injury." Now, what I believe it is, you might see the swelling there. I can see the swelling there. I know my own anatomy. And this side of my neck is swollen. Whenever there's a vibration, like music at a certain pitch or a bass frequency, it hurts my neck. This is communicating to a potential dislocation of my larynx. Because whenever something is dislocated, whenever something is loose, like if you get a tear, right? Say you get a tear in a piece of paper. If I blow, obviously that piece of paper is dislodged. Whereas if it's whole and you blow, it's not. So clearly, whenever there's a vibration, and that's all that sound is. Whenever there's a vibration, it's going to cause that part that has become loose or dislocated or dislodged to vibrate. Now at this level of speech, I'm not getting sharp pain. But when I swallow, because there's movement in the larynx when you swallow, the epiglottis closes. The epiglottis opens when you swallow, but your larynx rises to clip off the airways. So, do you see my larynx going up when I swallow? Do you see this unusual behavior in the muscles on the left? Do you see that sort of unusual movement of the larynx? It's not behaving as it should when I swallow, and I'm getting sharp pain. I was just in the A&E, and a Dr. Paul Kelly refused to see me, even though I'm presenting with a potentially serious throat injury. I told him it was the result of 10 years ago of a strangulation, where I was strangled for a prolonged period of time, and I believe that there was structural damage done at that time. I said there's been a recurrence of the injury, and I actually believe that it's been aggravated, it's been made worse than it initially was. And I said, that's why I'm presenting here. I said, what would you normally do in this situation where you would have to assess a potential neck injury? He said MRI. But I know for a fact that CAT scan can do it too. And I know for a fact that they have access to CAT scan there. And he's sending me back to a GP who has no access to either CAT scan or MRI, but he has access to them. And then would people wonder why I didn't go to A&E the other day when the doctor sent me with a letter without "this man needs a CAT scan," telling me that I should expect a CAT scan in A&E for my gut issues? I presented today in A&E with gut issues. I presented with an injury to my neck, an extant current injury to my throat that's causing me pain when I speak, when I breathe, when I swallow. And this man wants to send me away from A&E. Paul Kelly. I was just there a few minutes ago. He sent me away. He told me there's been a breakdown in our relationship. I said, how's there been a breakdown in our relationship? I'm just asking you to tell me in writing that what you're telling me is the norm here is as you say it is. If the man had no problem with what he was saying being true, he would have written it down. He would just be stating facts, right? But he didn't. And then he said, just after that, no, I believe our relationship is broken down. Our relationship is broken down? How? Are you saying it's broken down? Why? Because I've asked you to put your name to something in writing? Now you don't want to talk to me anymore? Then he starts alluding to the apprehension of being removed from the premises by a security guard. We're talking about a patient in A&E presenting with a neck injury being threatened with removal by a security guard after the doctor who said he was refusing to treat him refused to write down the reason why. And this is perfectly acceptable behaviour from members of our HSE. My GP sent me to A&E. He was so concerned about the state of my gut that he sent me to A&E, telling me that they would likely do a CAT scan. Then he failed to write that down in the letter he was sending to the doctor. So if I'm presenting today telling him that the doctor sent me saying that there would likely be a CAT scan, and the nurse who's triaging me immediately says, oh, I can't say that that's going to happen, combatively. And I said, well, it's just that the doctor said that that would be like the likely sort of diagnostic tool or something along those lines, to the best of my recollection. So if the doctor's saying that that's what I should expect presenting to A&E, are having been sent there by him, which I have the letter to prove that he sent me. What I don't have is proof that he said I should expect to receive a CAT scan. Why? Because he didn't write it in the letter. He was only talking. So here he is telling me you should expect a CAT scan, but he's not telling the doctor. See the point? Then I'm presenting again today with injury to my larynx. I'm not talking about a hoarse voice. I'm not even talking about vocal strain. I'm talking about a dislocation of the larynx. I'm talking about a dislodging of the actual larynx itself on the upper portion and around to the left. Sharp pain when I swallow. Whenever there's a low frequency around me, an actual sharp pain in my neck from a vibration. That's not good. That's really not a good sign at all, guys. And when you present to an A&E telling them that you have an injury that was the result of a strangulation and a recurrence of that same injury to an extent worse, where do they expect you should go? Because the initial injury was a blunt trauma to the neck. So a recurrence of that injury should be considered same as a blunt trauma, because the injury was arised as a result of a blunt trauma, as an actual strangulation. So all he says to me is, oh, this is a 10-year-old injury, and you're presenting to A&E. This is A&E, we only deal with. That's like saying, you had a heart attack 10 years ago. Why are you presenting here today with a heart attack? We're talking no man's land here. We're talking la-la land. I'm presenting with a neck injury. That's an emergency. You must, by law, assess me once I go in. That man, Paul Kelly, that doctor, refused to see me, even though I was presenting with a significant neck injury. He was happy to send me out of the place with nothing in writing, just his name signed on paper. What's the point in him signing his signature? Does he think I'm a fan? I wanted him to write down what he was telling me, the reason he was giving me for not seeing me. That's when he said, no, I believe our relationship's breaking down. I'll have to get another doctor to see you. Meanwhile, my larynx is not behaving properly. Look. See the way it shoots over to the right? Look. You see it shooting over and this unusual contraction here? I'm presenting with a difficulty with the actual mechanism of swallowing to an A&E, and the doctor is telling me I need to go and book an appointment to see an ENT sometime down the road through my GP, whenever I can get an appointment with him. That just actually happened tonight in Wexford A&E. It actually happened. I actually presented with damage to my throat, and they were happy to send me away. Happy to say it, happy to call a security guard, but refusing to write it down. Why? If that's normal procedure, why would you refuse to write that down? Because he must know that that's not right. That's the reason he didn't write it down, because he knows that what he is doing is wrong. If somebody presents to an A&E with a potential neck injury, if they're telling you that they have difficulty with the mechanism of swallowing, and you don't see them, you're committing a crime against that person. That is medical negligence. It's an actual crime. Look at the swelling there. I've pain in the back of my neck. It moves from here to the back of my neck. They didn't even want to hear about the nature of the pain. They didn't even want to listen. They didn't even do an examination. They didn't even look at me when I was swallowing. They didn't even ask me what the pain was like. They didn't do any assessment. Zero. Zilch, nada. They did no assessment of the reason I was presenting there. As soon as they saw old injury, they asked me to leave. That's absolute medical negligence. Somebody can have an old injury, but the recurrence of the injury can be an emergency. It's absolutely harebrained to send somebody away from an A&E who's presenting with damage to their throat, difficulty swallowing. What happens if that gets worse during the night and I can't actually breathe? What do I do? Call 999? What would Paul Kelly say? This is on his desk. You can't run away from this. He's the doctor who engaged me. He refused to see me in A&E. Point blank refused. He didn't even want to hear about the injury. I told him how it occurred initially. He didn't even want to hear about the nature of it. Now I just had a very, very sharp pain when I swallowed that time. And it's getting worse. Where do I go? Where do I go now with this injury to my throat? Where do I present? To a GP at this late hour? Maybe to an ENT at this late hour. Where do I go? Do I go to CareDoc? Will they care enough? Where would CareDoc send me if they were significantly concerned about my throat injury? Do you think they wouldn't send me to A&E? What doctor would hear a man say, I have difficulty swallowing and it's not tonsillitis, it's actually in the surrounding structures of my throat, and turn him away from A&E? I mean, this is absolutely overt medical negligence. Yeah, can you see that? Look at the significant swelling there. Now I know the light is on this side, so there will be a shadow cast, but look. You see? Compared to that side, look. You see how big that is? Do you see how my larynx doesn't behave properly? How it's not sitting right in my throat, look. You see it's shooting over that way? It would shoot over that way if the structures on this place, on this side, weren't holding it, you see. So if it had become dislodged, the muscle contraction on this side, raising the larynx, would displace it over to the right. So what I didn't get an opportunity to tell the doctor even, was that I believe there's a tear on the upper portion of my larynx around to the side. Even after I told him whenever there's music around, there's a sharp pain in my neck because of the vibration. That didn't alarm him. That didn't cause concern in him. I mean, this is crazy stuff. Absolute medical negligence. Somebody presenting to Wexford A&E, to a Dr. Paul Kelly, to a triage nurse. I called my GP today. They've only an appointment next Friday. So somebody present. Look how much it's shifting. Look. That's not normal. That's serious. And do you know how regularly you have to swallow your own saliva? Until there's an injury in your throat or you've got tonsillitis, you're not really aware of how regularly you're swallowing. Every time I swallow, I could be making the injury worse. They've done nothing about it. Nothing. They don't know that it's not life-threatening. They don't know that. Because if the larynx becomes significantly displaced or a tear in there gets worse over time, air can start entering into the chest cavity. You don't know what can happen. For a doctor to send you away from the A&E with a significant pain in your throat that is not some kind of infection or yeast infection, but is an actual structural pain in your throat, to send you away from an A&E without any x-ray, without any CAT scan, is absolute medical negligence and can only be seen as an attack on your person. It's a violent attack. Because it's a refusal to see you when it's their duty so to do. They've accepted it as their duty. Look. You see the swelling? Look. Do you see that behaviour on this side of my neck? That's not normal. You see all that contraction there? Look at that. How aggressive it is. Because it's like it's compensating for a loss of structural integrity. And these muscles here are pulling the whole larynx over that side. Look. Do you see it jolting over there? Look. Try and see it now. Look. If I put my finger in one position, and that's the center position of the larynx. Do you see that? Now watch. See how far it shifts over? Look. See it jumping over there and disappearing? I actually just presented to Wexford Hospital with an injury in my neck, and they told me I was in the wrong place. Blessings.